You talked about business relationships, and that's absolutely true. But I know whistleblowers who whistleblown and they can't get work in the industry anymore. I mean, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Deep Dive from the Kilcarney Law Firm. And I'm here with Edie Edens, and my name is Darshan Kulkarni. We're both at the Kilcarney Law Firm. Edie, the topic we're going to tackle right now is, should you whistleblow on a sponsor who is non-compliant? I'm going to start with the perspective of the site. So you always bring that valuable site insight. What do you think?
So this is delicate because on the one hand, non-compliance is non-compliance. That's a non-negotiable in terms of if something is truly crossed a line where reporting is required as the site, I'm never going to advise you to do anything that's not compliant. Having said that, that's a lot easier said than done on determining when, in fact, someone such as a sponsor, who, by the way, is also in a contract relationship with you and might be paying you money for your services, and you're trying to maintain a good business relationship with, that can all very much impact what you view and don't view as compliant. I think there's some issues that are so egregious. Everyone would agree you have no choice but to report, you have no choice but to whistleblow. I also think there's even more situations that are very gray where people would go, I'm not sure if I'm required to, or if I do and I worry I should, I'm really worried about potential repercussions. Even though I know there's protection supposedly for whistleblowers, it's not always how that cookie actually crumbles. What about you?
But before we go into, I agree with you. Let's give a couple of examples of
Yeah.
what would be something you would whistleblow. So I think from a fraud and abuse perspective, overpayment is an area of whistleblowing. Question is, how much overpayment? Now, here's the funny part. Who would whistleblow in the context of overpayment to sites? I don't see a site going, you paid me too much, I'm going to complain. I don't see a sponsor going, oh, we paid you too much allegedly so that you can prescribe my drug more, I'm going to complain. So it's really going to be a disgruntled employee somewhere.
I think another good example is it might not even be quote unquote the legal line, but the ethical line. So if you are being
Mm,
encouraged or in any way pushed to do something that you as the site go, look, I don't think there's a law. I don't think you're paying for patient referrals, which I outright know is, illegal and we could all get in trouble, right? I don't think you're doing something on that level, but you are doing something that's a blatant violation of, say, GCP or best practices. For example, in a situation where a sponsor is pushing you to get your data or your information in before a lock, right?
mm,
But you can essentially get pushed if you're a coordinator into, look, just get the best data you can in, as
mm.
opposed to what about the integrity of the data, right? And in that type of a situation, I don't always think it's necessarily intentional that someone is trying to be nefarious, trying to be a bad actor. I do think you have situations where the integrity of the data is incredibly questionable, unable to be reproduced, and it was pushed faster or put into a system that was known to create these issues. And I think at a certain point, whoever is requiring that, whether it's a CRO or sponsor in that particular situation, is encouraging a data integrity issue, and it's reckless. And so that's where I could see something that falls into a very gray area that concerns a site. I have multiple trials with this particular entity. They continue to have me use this. We continue to have this problem. I continue to report to them. I'm nervous about this, concerned about this, and I'm not being heard. And I'm very concerned that my site is potentially not giving the best data, or that this sponsor CRO is not concerned about the data. And also, I know they have, say, 50 other sites. And also, let's face it, like false claims and some of those pieces, those come with some key TAM reporting money attached. So those are a bit incentivized for a whistleblower.
For me, it's a few things I'd add to that. So number one, I think people should recognize that the CRO in question, for example, there was the Indian CRO
Mm,
that
great example.
that recently got into trouble for lack of appropriate oversight. In that scenario, what you had was exactly this issue, which is the CRO was not treating data appropriately, and a bunch of different sponsors have now been caught up in this.
Yep.
So should they be reported on? Possibly. The second question, you talked about pushing. I've seen situations where informed consent is more of an issue. Like some people will say, do you get informed consent? Other people say you shouldn't. That's a little bit more of a
Oh,
gray
yeah.
area, but it's a judgment call. So I would say things like judgment calls, people are trying to take the best efforts. I'd say you record it and you kind of go, people have taken the best efforts, and you kind of consider whether this is one you move on from. Because as you pointed out, it's not just, people are going to always make judgment calls. And just because you disagree on a judgment call doesn't mean you're right or you're wrong. You talked about business relationships, and that's absolutely true. But I know whistleblowers who whistleblown and they can't get work in the industry anymore.
Enjoying our content? We'd love to hear more. Please like, share, comment, and find more on our website.
Well, and if we're advising a client in this particular scenario who comes to us and goes, first, I just want to check this. Should I be worried? Is this even illegal? Is this even in a gray zone, let alone a black and white zone of, clearly a problem? And we're able to confirm for that entity or individual, yes, this is definitely in the gray, if not firmly in the non-compliance territory. You should be concerned. You have officially seen something at this point. Then the very next thing that's going to come out of their mouth is that business relationship consideration of, look, I don't want to not follow the rules, Edie. I have no desire to promulgate this behavior, and maybe I didn't even initiate it. I'm just a recipient of it. But at the same time, this is a huge component of my business. It's a part of my ecosystem. It's a part of, what is the relationship? It's not just about money. It's about being, this is, like you said, something that could get your organization or you as an individual, whether it's official or not, whether we have protections or not. We've all seen it happen where someone is unemployable or untouchable after a situation like this. And that's scary consideration, because that's really not how whistleblower protections were set up. We have a lot of, components and pieces that go into the mix to try to prevent that, because we do want people to feel safe whistleblowing. But I don't know about you. I've never advised a client to whistleblow without telling them that they're running a real risk.
I agree with you. I've always advised that you may absolutely choose to do this, but recognize what you're taking on. You're taking on not just, even if you're right and you survive and they are wrong, you might land up paying a price. And if you're willing to do that, kudos to you. I'll tell you where to go, all of those good things, but recognize what you just took on. I don't know too many people who at the end of that conversation have gone, you know what, I'm going to do it anyways. I know some people who've done it separately, but I would say if I was counting it out of every 100 people, maybe one will do it, is my experience. That's not to say you shouldn't do it. In fact, I would argue that from a patient perspective, from a safety perspective, from a quality perspective, you absolutely should. But there's a human price to pay that no one considers as much. And in fact, that's the reason why you should check out the other podcasts we're pulling out on whether sponsors should actually voluntarily self-report. And is our answer different from the one we're giving here? Is a different discussion. But anything more you want to add to this one, Edie?
I think this is where you make the point of, please don't make this decision lightly. I don't want to scare anyone out of reporting who rightfully should. I don't want to talk anyone into doing something that could hurt them and they don't, they didn't make that decision knowingly. I want to have the great conversation with you so that at least when you make that decision, it was right for you. It was right for your organization, and you can stand by what happens next.
Find related podcasts below.
Depending on what the situation is, you could be whistleblowing to, number one, if you're going through a sponsor, they might have a compliance officer. You might have to respond to that. If you decide to go up that food chain, you might decide that you want to respond to the IRB. You might decide that you want to reach out to if you're going down the legal route, the state attorney general's office or the U.S. attorney's office. Appropriately, depending on what's happening, it could be the FDA as well. And I've seen those happen. Edie, if people have questions about this, where can they reach us?
They can reach us on the website, kulkarnilawfirm.com. They can always find us on LinkedIn. We can't stop talking there. And of course, you can get us on email at Edie or Darshan, and that's both at kulkarnilawfirm.com.
Awesome. Thank you again, Edie.
Yeah.
Call, click, or email